Welcome back to Pro Life Without Borders with Sarah and Michaela. We are so excited to be back with you again. We are still making updates on our setup. We have yet another camera. We're trying, guys. We're trying. We wanted to do audio only. Let's just.
I would just like to throw it out there that I didn't want a video portion.
No,
we were audio only. I could record in my pajamas.
Yep. Didn't matter what we looked like.
My hair wasn't going to be a concern. My lipstick wasn't going to be a concern.
Nope. But you guys, we were instructed. See, this is the thing about nonprofits that people don't realize. Everyone thinks I'm the boss. I'm not the boss. I'm not the boss. It's true. We have a board of directors, and right now we have 8 board members. And
they're the boss.
They're the boss. They are the boss, which is great because it's like this. It's actually really good. I like the way nonprofits are structured. It gives you accountability. Your board often comes from like your donor base and your community. So like they have a stake in what you're doing. I know our board totally does. They're very passionate about what we do. And like we work really well together. Like I love my board. And I'm not just saying that because this is recorded. I love them. But 2 of them we were talking about podcasts. They were like, no, you really need to do a video element. Like we think that's really important. And like they were being like, I'm sure they would not have been like, you have to do this even if you don't want to.
Yeah.
But like if they want us to do something, we should try. Right? Like we should at least try.
Yeah.
So we're trying. We're trying. This is dedicated to Matt and Tom.
Yeah. Just for you.
Just here we guys. I hope you enjoy it.
Anyway. Local news or a story from the chat line.
I think we should talk about a story from the chat line.
Yeah, there's so many of them. I don't even know which one to pick. This week, actually, I do know which one to pick. This past week, we did a follow-up on the chat line, and Mom had reached out to us something like 28, 32 weeks along.
Mm-hmm.
She was
pregnant.
She was pregnant,
really pregnant,
seeking an abortion. And we were able to talk with her, gave her some resources, and we follow up after their initial contact with us, they get a 3-month follow-up, and we'll explain what we're talking about in a minute. Anyway, we followed up with, and Mom chose life and sent us pictures of her baby, which shows you how pregnant she really was when she first contacted us, because we have like a very healthy, chubby baby pictures. And 3 months ago, she was wanting an abortion.
Right. Well, and that's what's so scary. And this is what we can't get. I don't want to say we can't get people to understand, because we can. There are people who understand, but there are people who don't. This home abortion thing is a disaster. And women they're trying abortions. They're successfully having abortions at 20, 25, 30, 35 weeks. And you're thinking, oh, how could you have a successful abortion at 35 weeks? Well, what is a successful abortion? And your pregnancy. Well, ending your pregnancy could mean you're not pregnant anymore, and now you have a full-term or nearly full-term baby
that's alive and breathing and
screaming and crying because it was just born, and you've got this panic-stricken mother who did not expect to go into labor for whatever reason, because she's thinking, oh, I'm having an abortion, which is totally different. And so there's like this lack of education, there's lack of understanding, there's these groups, organizations that are pushing home abortion as safe and
there's politicians saying we don't want abortions late. Some politicians say that they're not advocating for late abortions, right, but they are, and they just don't want to talk about it.
Right. And and then we hear that, oh, well, it's only this percent or that percent. I don't care. Like 1 is too many. Like one woman having a baby at 35 weeks at home alone because she thinks she's having an abortion is too many.
No. And then there's the question of what happens to these babies once they're born. And you and I know the answer, at least in a lot of cases.
Yeah. In a lot of cases, moms panic and they make very poor choices. Sometimes babies are safe.
Yeah.
But not always.
Not always. So, but this time a baby was safe because a woman reached out onto the international chat line, and we were able to connect her with the resource in her country, and she chose life, and now there's a baby who is safe.
And the moms love them. Like,
yeah, they're always doting on their, like, look at my prince that's been born. Look at
my beautiful baby. This baby is so beautiful. And they'll say things like, oh my goodness, thank you for saving me. Thank you for telling me this was a bad idea. Thank you for saving my child. Like, I can't imagine how I would feel if I had gone through with it.
Yeah. So
they love their children. Like, they love their babies. And they're good moms.
Yeah,
like,
they're great moms.
They're all like bundled up, and
they're always
bundled up.
It could be 200 degrees in Africa, and they're gonna bundle
them up. We're like looking at, they're sending us, and this is one of the things we learned early on, because they would send us these pictures, and it would be these babies, and they were like wearing like hats and scarves and blankets, and we're like, is it cold? And they were like, oh, it's so cold. And then they would tell us how cold it was, and we're like,
it's not cold.
But then, I mean, like, but then there's people in Norway, and their babies are like sleeping outside on the porch, and
I love like
snow.
the Norwegian like baby sleeping outside thing.
I can't
like
do it.
I think it's so, I want to be a Norwegian baby. Like I just want to be like bundled up in a little carrier, and then just someone leave me on the porch to sleep.
They leave them outside grocery stores.
Yeah.
I'm just like, how can you do that?
I guess Norway is relatively safe. I guess people are, maybe Norway is pro-life. They're not, but
not at all. Well, and then
it was a nice thought.
But like, I feel like I get nervous as a mom, and I have 6 children, so I shouldn't be. But I get nervous, like, if Jonathan, my youngest, is in his crib, like 5 feet down the hall. I have to go check and make sure he's breathing.
I get nervous when my mom leaves me outside of Walmart to go do something.
Or like, I'm like, which I will admit I use to my advantage a little bit. Like, Jonathan likes to sleep in our bed. Like, we co-sleep. No,
okay.
Please don't come at me, internet people. I know it's
not up for discussion.
Yeah, I'm doing it. It's
just a statement.
I've had 6 children. Just move on. They're all alive. And he likes to sleep in my bed, but I can't leave him in the bed.
Sure.
So I'll be like, oh, Jonathan's napping, so I have to like sit up here and read my book for like an hour and a half while he takes a nap. But like, the reality is, if he woke up and I wasn't there, he would just crawl off the bed, because he has no concept of danger or gravity or falling to your, doom, as my older kids would say.
Your own detriment.
Yeah, and next thing you know, he'd be like eating, I don't even know what, because he can find anything.
Yeah, you thought your floors were
clean. I know. And then like the other day, he was trying to pick up like a Cheerio, like a soggy Cheerio, because he's eating cereal now, but you have to get it like really soggy.
Yeah.
Otherwise, because he only has like front teeth, so he'll chew like this, which is really funny. But he's trying to like pick up this Cheerio, and he like can't get it, and it's like sliding all over the tray. And he's like very determined to like, but every time he pinched it, it would like squish out of his fingers because it was wet. But he comes up to my room where I'm cleaning, and he finds a penny on the floor and has it off the floor and in his mouth in like 2 seconds. And I'm like, how can you not get a Cheerio off of your tray? 2 things that are designed to like, the tray is designed to like, food should go into your body. It's food that should go into your body. But a penny, no problem.
He's talented.
He's something. Anyway. What is the international department?
Right. So the topic of the day, since we did a story from the chat line and a story from Jonathan's like Cheerio
escapades of Jonathan.
Yeah, the international chat line has become like a very integral part of our ministry here at Promise of Life.
Well, and I would say like, which is crazy to me, because when it started, I remember talking to the board and being like, I don't know, maybe it'll last like 6 months. Maybe it'll last like a year, and we're going on year 5.
5,
and it's still going very strong.
Yeah, overwhelmingly strong at times.
Yeah.
So what is the international department is kind of the first question we have on the docket, because I think some of our donors know what the international department is. Some people listening might not even know. They're like, we thought you were in Western Pennsylvania. Like, what is our international department?
Right. Well, we are in Western Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
But we also have an international division. So Promise of Life Network is made up of 6 divisions.
Mm-hmm.
We have our medical facility, which we talked about last week, and our parenting program, which we talked about last week. Then we have abstinence education, which is now sexual risk avoidance. And then we have our grief support. And then we have Sarah and Bowen, which is like our information arm. The podcast is technically like under that umbrella right now. And then we have our at-home abortion facts division. And so that started, and it started back in like 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was meeting with a friend of mine who runs a pregnancy center in Pittsburgh, and we were like kind of just spitballing, like, what is hitting America? Like, what is our concern? Like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? What do we have to address? How do we keep ahead of the curve? And one of the things we talked about was home abortion. And it was very, very new to the pregnancy help world. Most people, in fact, I feel like we're the only ones who are talking about it. We're not talking about it at all. But the reality was, even then, you could go online and you could buy abortion pills and you could have them shipped to your house.
Right.
And you didn't have to have a doctor's appointment. All you had to have was a credit card.
Yeah.
Like, they don't care. These abortion pill providers do not care how far along you are. They don't care if you're allergic to the meds. They don't care about anything. Some of them, I would say, like, if you're looking at ethics on like a spectrum, I would say they're all unethical. Some of them are really unethical. Like, they're not even sending you what you think you're getting.
Yeah.
Others are slightly more ethical in that at least you know what you're getting, and they may ask, like, when was your last period?
Or they'll have a doctor like sign off on it. Even.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, they're not really checking.
Yeah.
And so we were like, wow, like, someone needs to address this. So we are like, we'll put a website together. We gathered this like team of like crack volunteers at the time. Like, they were just all over the country and they helped us write all this content.
Right.
In fact, I remember one of our volunteers was from like the northern part of Alaska. And like Alaska, at one point she ran out of data and was like, I can't work on the website till my data comes back.
Right, because they had like limited internet.
Right. Because they were so far north. Like, you can't even drive to where they used to live.
Yeah.
You have to fly and then like snowmobile around or have dogs, which is crazy, which was fun. But yeah, but she was able to help, and like, just a tremendous team. And then we launch all of this.
Yeah.
And very first day.
Yeah. So like August of 2019, by the time the website launched.
Yep. Very first day we get a message from someone in Africa.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, that's weird.
Yeah.
What an odd thing to happen.
Yeah.
Today on this day of all days. But like, at the time, we've always gotten at random, very, very spread apart calls, messages from people outside the country.
Sure.
Like, I remember getting a call from India.
Yeah.
When in 2008, like, we didn't even have internet in the center at the time. Like, I'm just sitting there and this like lady calls me and she has an Indian accent, which is whatever. I'm like, okay, like, you could live next door. I don't know. And she's like, no, I'm in India. And I'm like, well, I can't help you because, I don't have internet. I can't even look anything up. But it would happen just like very, very rarely. It would be like once every 6 months we would get.
Yeah.
But then the next day we got another one.
Yeah.
And it kind of just kept going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so that was like late 2019. And so our social media manager at the time was just kind of handling these inquiries as they came in.
Right.
And mostly I think she was just trying to find a pregnancy center in their country. And she was like, here you go. And then they just kept coming in. And then 2020 happened and everyone was home. Well, some of us were home. Some of us weren't essential. But essential. Some of us were non-essential employees.
Wished I was non-essential.
So I was living my non-essential employee life at home, like baking my sourdough bread and trying not to contract a fatal illness. And the chat line just was continuing on. Mm-hmm. And more women were coming on, especially I think because of the pandemic. I think that definitely spurred it.
Well, because a lot of countries, like, we complained in America. I complained.
It was not that bad here compared to other places.
Which no excuse. I still think whatever. But yeah, other places were much more locked down than we are.
And of course, like, medical care in Africa, parts of Africa is very different than here in the States. So they didn't have the same resources and so they just kept coming. And so that's when I jumped on, is because I was non-essential at home.
You were like, well, we need something for Michaela.
Well, for context, I at the time was our sexual risk avoidance specialist. Like, that was what I was doing, and I was going into the school districts, and the school districts were shut down. There was no one going to school in Pennsylvania during this time. And so I jumped on to help with the chat line, and they just kept coming. Mm-hmm. And it became a couple a day, and then it was 10 a day, and then it kept going. And in November of 2020 is when it really took off. Out of nowhere, we had over 700 women in 1 month. Individual women.
Yeah, not conversations, because we still had people from previous months that were messaging us, and we hadn't figured out following up at this point.
No, not really. No. Like, we were following up, but it was sporadic.
It was very much like, oh, I had a good conversation with this person. I'm going to put them on the calendar to follow up with
this
later.
Person said something very concerning. I'm going to try to follow up with them.
Yeah.
so November of 2020 is when we had over 700 women. And by that point, we were like, we can't do this by ourselves.
Mhm.
And so we started bringing on volunteers.
Well, I think we had a couple because I
There
remember,
were,
I remember biking on Memorial Day.
we had a couple of people
was
who
it
would
Labor
watch
Day?
it. I think it was Labor Day.
Yeah, I was biking on Labor Day, and I was like, and I literally posted was like, we need volunteers
Yeah.
because I was like, this is not good.
Yeah.
Like it was like the middle of the, you and I would wake up in the middle of the night and start like messaging
it was
people
bad
because they would just build up and there'd be like 30 people.
Yeah. And so we had volunteers, bless their hearts. They didn't have any training really.
It's a very Southern thing to say. Did you
My
just
son-
bless? Did you just bless their hearts? They're
I
gonna see
did.
this.
I did.
They're gonna see
But
this.
like in a genuine way.
Okay.
Yeah, not in like a, well, bless their hearts kind of way, but like in a genuine
I'm
way.
from the North. We don't bless people's hearts in any way.
So they didn't have much
They
training.
had zero training. They didn't have much
Yeah, I was
training.
trying to be nice
We were
about
like,
it.
good luck. Good luck talking to 40 women at the same time.
And they were troopers, and we made it work.
Mhm.
And
we made
clients,
so many mistakes.
Yeah, we made mistakes. The clients were cared for. Women were getting the information they needed. And in December of 2020 is when we kind of formalized like, this is happening.
Yeah.
Like, okay, like we have an international arm now.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the crazy thing is, so this is not supposed to happen.
Obviously, like we were just trying to put out a website geared towards American women, right, warning about abortion pills.
Yeah, and the goal was not.
That was it. That was all we were trying to do.
Our goal was not to like chat with people. Our goal was not to have people call us.
We didn't want to talk to anyone.
It was just information. Like it was just information because we were like, we don't have the bandwidth to do this.
Yeah.
Which we didn't, but we did. We just did it.
Yeah.
And so I remember our board. It's like a very board heavy conversation. I love our board.
The board's great. Other than the video,
other than making this video, which is we'll probably later be like, we are sorry because it worked out really well.
This will be a good litmus test to see if our board is engaged and like watching and watching. Content.
Yeah, we're gonna find out.
We're gonna get a phone call and like, hey,
if in a couple months you see an official apology video, you know they watched it.
They're great.
They are great.
And they have great senses of humor.
They do.
I feel like it's important to point out.
Yeah, no, they're a really good time. So they were like, okay, this is obviously something God's calling us to do, and we don't have the budget, but we're gonna do it anyway. And kid you not, less than 2 weeks later, a check shows up to cover the entire first year's operating expenses.
Yeah.
Like one check. Like not a bunch of checks,
just
one singular check. Like to the point where one of my staff was like, we got to check in this amount. And I was like, are you unwell?
I remember this check.
I was like, do you need to lay down? Because you are not looking at a check of that amount because checks can't be that amount.
I remember that check. I remember all of us being like,
we all like passed it around. Like it like touched it like with our hands. So we were like,
a famous check.
I touched the check. But that, and I firmly believe with all of my heart that if we had not said yes, that check would not have come.
Yeah.
But like the Lord was like, I want you to do this and I want you to step out in faith. And we did. And it's been a roller coaster ever since.
It has been. So just to give you kind of an idea of what the Chatline operates like.
Right.
And there are some details that we can't share just because of security reasons.
Mm-hmm. So if it feels vague, that's because it is.
Yeah.
And if you think, oh, I'm going to email them a very specific question and they're going to answer it, we will not.
We won't. But essentially what happens is we have women from all over the world message us. And most of them are seeking to do an abortion at home.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally we get some that have already done an abortion at home and they have questions about it. Or every now and then we'll get someone who had an abortion in their past and it's on their mind. But I would say by and large, a majority of these women are actively seeking to do an abortion at home and have questions surrounding that.
Right. And typically they want us to give them an abortion at home. So like that, they want to buy it from us.
Yeah. Or they want information about how to do it. Like they want to know what herbs do I take or things like that.
Or like I have pills, how do I take them? Or I can get the pills, how do I take them? And they want us to walk them through that process.
Yeah. And so we have volunteers. We have some staff. You're on the chat line. I serve on the chat line. We have a chat line coordinator now. Her name is Nicole. And she kind of oversees the daily ins and outs of running the chat line. But by and large, it is staffed by volunteers. And so these volunteers are there. They're taking shifts every week, and the chat line is staffed from 10 a.m. to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Yeah, it's a long
If it was
day.
10 a.m. to 7 p.m.,
that would be nice.
That'd be a
but it's not.
day.
It is 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And so volunteers are signing up, and someone will say, hey, I'll take whatever chats come in from 7 to 9 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone will come on at 9 and do from 9 to 12.
But we have one person that does 7 to 8.
It's true.
She's the saint.
She's the saint. She's the MVP every year, because I don't want to do the 7
No, if
a.m.
I'm on at 7, like my
Things are not good.
eyeballs peel open at 6:58.
Yeah.
And I am chatting in my
I also find that my attitude is a little bit different at 7 a.m. It's not that I'm not empathetic or like sympathetic or caring, because I think we have to be those things.
Oh, absolutely.
That being said, like I've got just a smidge more attitude at 7 a.m. when someone's like, I want to have an abortion and I'm 30 weeks. And I'm just like, you're not getting an abortion at 30 weeks.
I tend to be
It's 7 a.m.
It's not there.
It's not 7 a.m. for them.
No,
it's
most of the time
in my heart.
In our hearts. Any conversation that happens before 10 a.m., I'm just like, let's slow down. I realized that, like, because I am tired. Yeah. Like, yes, slowing down.
Through, AKA, I need to get my
coffee. I need to sip on my coffee a little bit before we have this conversation.
Yeah. So the 7 a.m. volunteer,
she's solid.
She is solid.
And she usually has like from the night before.
They come in
like we say that the chat is off, but it's not off.
It's not.
We're just not there. Just not answering. So they get like an away message. Yeah. Like, hey, we'll be back soon, which they're always super like chill with.
Yeah.
Like, every once in a while we'll get someone that's like, hello.
Yeah, they're upset.
Why aren't you answering?
I usually have to explain, like, well, I'm in the United States and it was 4 a.m.
Yeah.
And I do sleep. I like to sleep.
Yes, so much. But they're usually fine with that. And then she'll come on and be like, hey, like here we are. Yeah. And then she'll kind of like clean everything up and log everyone.
But essentially what happens is they reach out to us and we get some information starting off. Like we're trying to figure out, have they taken a pregnancy test?
Have they taken a store-bought pregnancy
test? A store-bought pregnancy test, or had their pregnancy confirmed by a actual doctor.
Yes, a real doctor, not someone who just put doctor in their Facebook, but like a real medical person.
Yeah.
Because that tripped us up in the beginning, because we were okay. And I think I was either you or me, but I think it was me that stumbled on this truth. I think it was me because it was a banner day.
Yeah.
And I was talking to this young woman and she was saying she was pregnant. She took a pregnancy test. She was pregnant. And I'm like, wow, this is bizarre because you haven't even missed a period.
Yeah.
Like,
and here in the States, like it's pretty rare unless people are actively tracking because they're trying to conceive. It's pretty rare for someone to know they're pregnant 2 weeks into it.
Right.
Like usually
you can't. Like you have to be at least like 3 to 4 weeks.
I was about to say usually it's somewhere in like the 4 to 5 week range because you've missed a period, and that's when you kind of start feeling sick, you know.
Right.
If
but
you're
even
getting
like even if you were like, I know my body and I know I conceived yesterday, you're not going to get a positive pregnancy test.
No.
And especially if you're
you don't have the HCG levels built up to
they haven't. Yeah, because like when you're 2 weeks pregnant, we should do a podcast.
Yeah,
when you're 2 weeks pregnant, you're not pregnant. Like pregnancy has been dated for 100 million years from like the first day of your last period. So when you become pregnant, like the day of conception, your calendar says you're 2 weeks pregnant, which confuses the heck out of
everybody. Yeah, even because sometimes even I'm like,
And I remember telling people like when I was pregnant with my first, they're like, how far along are you? And I was like, 4 weeks. And they're like, wow, already. And I'm like, well, the first 2 weeks aren't real. And they're like, what? And I'm like, whatever. But anyway, so this girl was like, yeah, I'm totally pregnant. I did the pregnancy test and I haven't missed a period. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And then I found out she was putting her urine in a bowl and dissolving salt in her urine. And the old wives' tale says that if the salt dissolves in your urine, you're pregnant. But like the trick is, if you stir it long enough, it's gonna dissolve.
Yeah,
like it doesn't matter.
Leave it sitting there for days, it'll dissolve.
Yeah, and so we learned. And so I had to explain to this young woman, I was like, this is not an accurate way to tell if you're pregnant. Like you're probably turned out she wasn't pregnant, which she was very relieved about. And we talked about abstinence and boundaries and relationships and whatever. But like we have had to ask them, like, what kind of test did you do? Which is really funny because some of them are like, oh no, I didn't do the salt test. Like they know it. Like they know
Yeah.
it's the salt test. And then other girls are like, wait, what? Like that's not real. And we're like, no, 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 it's not real. And then still other ones are like, what other test is there? Like I bought one at a store.
Yeah.
And we're like,
so there's
that's
a range of people we talk to on the chat
yeah,
line.
because some of them, and I think that Americans have this idea of like Africa being like everyone's living in like a hut in the bush and they have no access to anything, and that's just not accurate. Like we talked to
it's accurate for some of our
right, yeah,
like
it's not,
a lot of our clients,
yeah, some of
but
our
also
clients,
like
but
some
not
of the
all of
major
them.
some of the major cities
Yeah,
are,
like if you were in like Johannesburg,
yeah,
you
Cape
wouldn't,
Town,
yeah, you wouldn't feel like, oh my goodness, this is, you just be like, oh, I'm in a city.
So yeah, so those are the types of questions that our volunteers are asking, is just trying to gauge the situation. And then we'll be like, okay, you know, we've got some of this information, why are you considering an abortion? Or depending on what the situation is, we're trying to, you know, just figure out what's going on, because and sometimes it's, you know, the father of the baby left. Most of the time it's the father of the baby. Every now and then those types of questions have unveiled bigger situations that are much more alarming than
trafficking,
trafficking, incest, which rituals,
right. I mean, crazy stuff.
Yeah, all sorts of things. And then we always try to refer them to a pregnancy help resource in their country. That is, if we can only do one thing, that is, I think, what we're trying to do here, is get them information for someone in their country that they can talk to. And sometimes that's a pregnancy center, sometimes that's a pastor or a missionary. In some cases, lo and behold, a lot of countries don't have like a thriving pregnancy help network like we have in the States.
A lot of times there's one.
There's like a pregnancy
There's
center.
a pregnancy, like in Nepal. It's just Voice of Fetus holding down the entire country.
I love Voice of Fetus.
He's great. Like he will talk to anyone.
Yeah,
and
he's doing a great job.
Yeah, he
is Voice of Fetus.
Like he's doing awesome. And then there's one in Botswana that we have contact with. There's one in Guyana that we found. Like, and maybe there are more, but they're not online, or we can't reach them, or we can't contact them. So we kind of try to get them to one person in their group.
Yeah.
And then because there's one, sometimes there isn't always a lot they can do, but at least they can talk to them and they can explain like laws, and they can explain like sports and like what.
There's also something to be said for talking to someone like in your own language,
right, in your own culture.
And we can talk to them, and we do talk to them about a variety of things, but it just hits home, I think, when they're able to talk to someone in their country and who understands fully their situation, because I can't.
No.
I can try my best, and I do, but at the end of the day, I'm not from Nigeria. I don't know what it's like to be Nigerian. I don't know. I don't live in Nigeria. I've never been to Nigeria.
There's a lot of gaps.
Yeah. And some things, it doesn't matter, right? Like babies are babies regardless of what nationality they are. But
yeah. But there's differences.
But there's differences in how cultures approach things.
And then the other thing that we do, here's our former board member who also used to be my former professor. She would always talk about like strengths-based perspectives. Like, what are the strengths this person has, and beyond like how we can help them. So we're not coming in and saying, oh, we're here to help you. But like, what's happening
in college too?
Love her.
I'm like, wait, this sounds familiar.
I learned about strengths-based perspective. And so we talked like, what's your situation? Like, where have you talked to your parents? Have you talked to your mom? Have you talked to your sister? Have you talked to your cousin? Have you talked to your boyfriend? Have you talked to his family?
Yes.
Because those are all potential strengths. Have you talked to your church? Have you talked to and because a lot of times they're alone, or they feel alone, like I can't tell anyone, that I have to keep this a secret. And so kind of like helping them see like, no, you need to talk to people in your community. Like, you need to talk to people who understand you and your situation, understand your value system, and are willing to like walk with you through this. And usually their parents end up being like the biggest supporter.
Right.
It's usually their mom.
Yeah.
Like, moms are great.
Yeah. So we're trying to connect them with resources in their country. And then we'll have, depending on what their situation is, there's other conversations that we'll have. Oftentimes we have a talk about abstinence and like, hey, the choices that you're making could be the stress could be reduced if you were making better choices.
Yeah. Well, and like, especially if they're not pregnant, like, okay, so you're not pregnant. Do you want to feel this way again?
Right.
Like, do you want to next month when your period is late, or if you think your period is late, panic because you think you might be pregnant or actually be pregnant?
Yeah.
And you're saying that this guy doesn't care about you. He disappeared as soon as you told him you might be pregnant. He's already with some other girl. Like, is this the guy that you want to be with? Is this someone that you want in your life?
Yeah. So that's what we're trying to do ultimately, is we're having those conversations, we're getting them connected to a resource in their country. And then most conversations, with very few exceptions, have a spiritual component to it.
Yeah. When we can.
Yeah, when we can. And like I said, there's very few exceptions in which that would not be the case. But for the most part, we're trying to have spiritual conversations as well. Because being pro-life, I think, is more than just saving a physical life here on earth. We also have eternal life to think about. And that can kind of segue into our Jesus moment.
Absolutely.
For the day is, the international department is part of Pregnancy Help. We're part of Promise of Life. That's what we're here to do. But we're also participating in the Great Commission, because we share the gospel with almost every client that comes on the chat line.
Yeah, and we do that in our, as much as possible in our local offices too.
Absolutely.
Because it's not about, like Michaela said, it's not about just saving a life. It's about, like, if we don't give them Jesus, if we don't at least offer them the opportunity to learn about Jesus, we're not really giving them anything.
Yeah.
They may walk out of here with diapers, wipes, baby clothes, prenatal vitamins. They may choose life. They may get referrals for XYZ help. But if they're not hearing about the fact that there's a God out there who loves them, that he sent his son to die for them, that son wants a relationship with them, then we have missed the boat.
And I think being on the chat line really highlighted that, because here in the States, it's I don't want to say that pregnancy help is easy, because we both know that it's not. But to some extent, it can be easy, because I can offer, and I can offer wipes, and I can offer furniture, and I can buy people food. I have those resources, and if I don't have them, I know someone who does.
Right. It's easy to find someone to help.
Yes.
In the physical.
And so there's like tangible things that I can do here in the States to help. When I have a 19-year-old client on the chat line who is pregnant and is considering abortion because she's hungry, there's not much I can do.
Right. We can't fly with two bags of groceries.
Fly to her. I can't take her to Aldi. I can't, and most of the time we're not even to pinpoint an exact location, because they live in a very remote part of maybe a hostile country. Like,
yeah,
there's nothing that I can do tangibly. And so oftentimes the only thing I can do on the chat line is share the gospel. And that's not to be like, well, as a last resort, here's Jesus.
Right.
It should be like the first thing that we offer.
Well, and it's such a faith strengthener, because so much so, like in the United States, we're like, hey, I want to pray for you. But also, and this is good, like this is what we should be doing. Right. But like, also, let me drop off groceries. Let me give you this referral. Let me tell you about this food bank. Let me tell you about this place that's going to help you with rent. Let me get you a car seat, whatever. But when we can't do that, but also sometimes we feel like, oh my goodness, what if I ask Jesus for help and nothing happens?
Yeah.
And then is this girl going to think like, oh, God's not real?
Right.
And then I'm like, okay, but do I think God's not real?
Yeah.
And so when I get really honest with them and I say, listen, I can't help you. I'm hundreds of thousands of, I'm thousands of miles away from you. I can't come to you and help you, but I know someone who can. Let's talk to him together. Like, that was a real faith moment for me, to be able to step out and pray that prayer and just trust that God was really going to help.
And he does.
And he does.
Every time.
Yes.
Like, we've never had a client come back that we've prayed with come back and be like, guess what?
Nothing happened.
Or I didn't have some sort of change, because they'll come to Christ.
Yep.
Or they get the help that they need.
And it usually comes in like a very unusual way.
Yeah. So like, it's there. And that's what the Great Commission is all about. Like, go into all the world, preach the gospel. I have Mark 16:15 jotted down, but there's a couple of passages in the Gospels that talk about the Great Commission. And then I also had jotted down that it's really, at least for me personally, it's made me have to really think about where my hope comes from, and like to be ready to give answer to that. And I think oftentimes I'm not, or I wasn't. it's not something that I think we're used to talking about, or at least we talk about it differently here in the States than if I was talking to someone in Africa. And of course, I have we'll just call it unique childhood. And so talking about things like this was not something that I could openly do where I lived. So I've had to learn, like, be prepared to give answer for the hope that we have out of First Peter.
Yep. And for me, I think the biggest lesson has been that my faith is not in me.
Yeah.
Or even in the church or in God's people, it's in God.
Yeah.
My faith is in Christ.
Yeah.
And if faith is in him, then, I'm not saying we shouldn't put actions to our faith, because that's really important.
Absolutely.
But we have to trust ultimately that Christ is in control, God is in control, and he can move mountains in ways that we can't even understand.
Because people fail.
Oh yeah.
Like if my faith was in me, we're doomed. If my faith was in you, we're doomed.
Very doomed.
And even, I mean, I love my church and they're fantastic people, but if my faith was in them, I'd be doomed.
Yep.
And we see that all of the time, like church hurts happen because lo and behold, God's church is made up of people who are fallible and sinful and make mistakes and selfish and
people get hurt.
And people get
hurt.
That
hurt is legitimate.
It is.
Can't turn our back on.
100% legitimate, which is why we don't put our hope in people and pastors. We put our hope in Christ.
Yep. Absolutely.
So
that is today's episode. Thank you for joining us as we chatted about the International Chatline. You'll hear a lot more about that. We'll share more stories. Actually, I'm feeling like we probably should just plan to do a part 2 in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Just to talk more, because I feel like we didn't really get to share any good stories. But just to recap, we have an International Chatline, came out of nowhere. But God is in control. God is taking care of us. And we did not share this, but we should have. About 84 to 85% of our clients choose life.
Yeah,
which is incredible.
And we also, like, just to give us an idea of scope, because I mentioned, like, that month in November where we talked to over 700 clients, that's been pretty standard since then.
Yes.
We have talked to over 24,000 women since 2019,
and
from 81 different countries.
Yep. And a very unfortunate amount of men. But we'll talk about that later. That's a different story for a different day. But yes, that's 24,000 legitimate clients, legitimate contacts.
Yeah.
That wanted to talk to us about their pregnancy or potential pregnancy or abortion or whatever.
Yeah.
24,000. That's a lot of people.
It is, from 81 different countries. Yep. I did the math one time. It's something like 40% or 45% of the globe.
Yep.
I did that because I was curious. But it turns out how many countries there are is actually up for debate,
right,
which
no
I didn't
really sure.
I didn't realize, but yeah.
I get it though now that we're in.
Now I understand why it's up for debate.
Yeah,
but
is that a country? That can't be a country.
But anyway, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Please like and subscribe. Join our Facebook group, Pro Life Without Borders, so that you can chat with us. You can tell us what you think about each episode, and you can ask for specific content or ask questions. You can also email podcast@promiseoflifenetwork.org, and you can listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day. We'll see you next week.
Bye.